Hello, everybody. You are listening to Your Neighbor on the Left, the podcast where we talk about liberal politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the introduction of Pope Leo XIV to the world, and at least one reaction from a conservative pundit. I'm going to introduce you to a woman by the name of Shiloh Hendrix. If you haven't heard of her yet, you probably won't be thrilled about the introduction that I'm going to give. Not really somebody that you want to know. We're going to talk a little bit about the new Surgeon General nominee, Casey Means, an RFK favorite. And we're also going to talk a little bit about not so much a news story, but our third hot topic of the week is going to be just addressing a simple question. Does Trump ever do anything wrong according to MAGA and his supporters? And then for today's deep dive, and this ties in a little bit with that third hot topic, is what I'm calling the MAGA echo chamber. And we're going to talk a little bit about the information that's available out there to Donald Trump supporters and how it helps to reshape or dare I say warp their reality. So let's jump right in, shall we? So we have a new pope this week, and he is the first American pope. He hails from Chicago, a cardinal by the name of Robert Prevost, and he was picked after a rather short conclave by historical standards. It only went 2 days, and he was announced to the world in the usual way on May 8th, and he chose as his papal name Pope Leo XIV. As for myself, thinking in the ways that I think, the first thing that I wanted to check out, because I don't believe his was one of the names that was out there ahead of time as a likely selection, but I wanted to see where he fell in the general thinking on the, conservative to progressive spectrum. And a lot of the stuff that I saw, not that there was a lot of it, but of the stuff I saw, a lot of it mentioned that he seems to fall on the more conservative side of things. He doesn't seem to have the same progressive views on tolerance for the LGBT community that Pope Francis seemed to have, and he, had made certain comments through the years that led people to believe that he was going to be a bit more conservative than the previous pope. And apparently, like everything else in the world today, it's all a matter of your perspective. And to that end, I introduce you to Laura Loomer. If you are lucky enough to not have ever heard of Laura Loomer, she is, I guess, most kindly described as an American far-right political activist and conspiracy theorist. She ran for the Republican seat in the Florida 21st Congressional District in 2020 and lost, and then she ran for the 11th District in 2022, and she lost that as well. Over the course of her career, she's been banned intermittently from platforms like Twitter, now X, Facebook, Instagram, PayPal, all for violating policies regarding hate speech and misinformation. She's big into anti-Muslim rhetoric. She has put forth many conspiracy theories, including false claims about 9/11. And now she is sort of an unofficial advisor to the president. She has regular contact with the administration, and particularly where dismissals and appointments are concerned, she seems to be able to weigh in with some degree of influence. She's not particularly well liked all across the GOP. From what I can tell, her involvement in Trump's inner circle seems to draw concern from quite a few Republicans who tend to think that her extreme views will actually alienate some voters. Try and picture that if you can. Being too extreme for mainstream conservatives. That's like being too spicy for a ghost pepper eating contest, I guess. And Loomer is actually the one who is in a way responsible for the new Surgeon General nominee that we're going to talk about in a bit, because she was the one who got the previous nominee bounced, a doctor by the name of Jeanette Nshewat, who Laura Loomer decided was not ideologically aligned with the Trump administration, and I guess by that virtue, then that meant she wasn't qualified. And when it was announced that Trump had pulled Nshewat as the nominee, Loomer posted to X a link to the news story with one word above it: scalp. I guess the inference that she had taken the scalp of another insuitable person from the Trump administration. Well, Ms. Loomer weighed in after the announcement of the new pope with a tweet that raised some concern, if only in the form of raised eyebrows. The tweet goes like this: "This is the new pope. His name is Robert Prevost. He is the first American pope. He is anti-Trump, anti-MAGA, pro-open borders, and a total Marxist like Pope Francis. Catholics don't have anything good to look forward to, just another Marxist puppet in the Vatican." And along with that lovely tweet, she posted a link to one of the tweets that the new pope had sent out back in 2015, where he criticized Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric. Then a little bit later in the day, she tweeted again, saying, "The new pope once retweeted a post about how we need to keep praying for career criminal and drug addict George Floyd." Now, George Floyd, if you recall, was a gentleman who had been killed in an altercation with the police, and she said, she goes on to quote his tweet, saying, "May all hatred, violence, and prejudice be eradicated." She wanted to know what prejudice he was talking about, and wanted to know if that was another way to describe a fentanyl overdose, which I guess she decided is the real reason that George Floyd died. And she throws in Marxist Pope in all caps at the end of it. I guess apparently what I'm supposed to take from this is that the party that it keeps putting itself out there as the Christian party and the values party and so on and so forth, at least this particular nugget of it here, Ms. Loomer, thinks that there are people that you shouldn't pray for. And apparently George Floyd is one of them, and she was criticizing then Cardinal. No, I guess he wasn't a cardinal yet. He had only been a cardinal for a short time before he was made pope. He was a bishop at the time, criticizing this bishop for who he says we should pray for. I'm honestly curious about what way my conservative friends would say I'm supposed to go with this. Again, as I mentioned, so much of what gets talked about when we talk about why people align with the right and the Republican Party has to do with the Christian values. And I just don't understand or how I'm supposed to wrap my head around the idea of a right-wing pundit like Laura Loomer coming out and telling me that not only is the Pope a Marxist because he doesn't agree with the administration's immigration policy, but also that when he says we should pray for somebody that has died for whatever reason they died, although I'm pretty sure no one other than Laura Loomer honestly believes it was an overdose. But to tell us that it's wrong to pray for somebody is absolutely crazy. I don't understand what the logic is on this and why anyone would think that Laura Loomer is right. Now, time will tell regarding Pope Leo XIV if he continues to come off as progressive as the previous pope or if he takes a more conservative stance on things. But here's hoping that brain trusts like Laura Loomer keep their nose out of it and don't continue to insult anybody just based on the fact that they actually espouse Christian values. Next up, I want to introduce you, if you aren't familiar with her yet, a Minnesota gal by the name of Shiloh Hendrix. Now, Shiloh Hendrix is a woman from Minnesota who was thrust into the 15 minutes of her fame when she was captured on video at Soldiers Field Memorial Park in Rochester, Minnesota. And apparently, from what I can gather, what happened was she was there with her child, and there was another child there, a 5-year-old African-American child. And at some point, the 5-year-old toddled over and was trying to pull toys or something out of her toddler's diaper bag. Now, first of all, anyone who's ever spent any time around a 5-year-old will know without any uncertainty that this is not particularly strange behavior for a 5-year-old. But anyway, in the process of discouraging the young black child from taking anything out of her diaper bag, she began to yell at the child and included as part of her rants the N-word multiple times directed at, again, the 5-year-old child. So somebody caught this interaction on their phone camera and confronted the woman and even got her to repeat her slur. And then they posted it to X and TikTok, and it went viral for a bit, as those things tend to do. Now, that part of the story is interesting enough in a disgusting way. But then moving forward from there, I guess as a response to the negative feedback that she got from this video, she went to a crowdfunding site called Give, Send, Go, and had a fundraiser entitled "Help Me Protect My Family," and saying her address and personal details had been leaked and that she and her children had received threats. Now, I can't speak to whether or not that was accurate. If it was, I really don't think it's appropriate to release information like that. But within days of the fundraiser, she had collected more than $700,000 in donations. It boggles the mind. And, you know, the family of the child who she was harassing also put put up a crowdfunding post on a site, and didn't get nearly as much as Ms. Hendrix did. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. I'm not exactly sure why you need a crowdfunding site in any of this, but the point is, thousands and thousands of people went on to Give, Send, Go and donated money to Ms. Hendrix, and as if the amount of people who were willing to support her blatantly racist behavior, some of the donors, you pick, I guess, like a screen name or whatever when you're going to donate to one of these sites, and some of the screen names are the most horrendous things you've ever seen. Things like Africa is a dump, and hate, N-word, and I can't read most of them, but they are literally disgusting, including some of them had things like two donors who used the names Average White Man and White Lives Matter, respectively, each contributed $1,488. Now, if that seems like an odd amount, then you have to think like they do. The number 14 is shorthand for a 14-word slogan about the, quote, future for white children, and 88 stands for Heil Hitler, according to the Anti-Defamation League, 8 being the number of H in the alphabet, so HH. And I wanted to mention this story, I mean, the obvious reason that it's a incredibly disgusting story, but also the idea that, we talk so much these days about how we need to be protected from things, like we have to be protected from illegal immigrants, and we have to be protected from the trans community, and we have to be protected from drag queens. And on the flip side of that, we don't hear a lot of rhetoric about how we need to be protected from white supremacy and the people who espouse that belief. And as you can see, not only were there a lot of these folks who chimed in, they were willing to put their money where their filthy mouths were. And, I can tell you that as far as the conservative folks that I know, I don't believe I know any who are openly racist. In fact, I would describe most of them as being very racially tolerant. And I'm confused as to why this administration doesn't do as much ranting and raving about white supremacy and the gangs that are involved with that and the dangers that it poses, as they seem to put out about other things that we need to be terrified about. It's hypocritical, to say the least. Also worth mentioning is this Give, Send, Go is a Christian crowdfunding website, and at least as of the time of the article that I have in front of me, they haven't decided to stop the fundraiser. They haven't decided to take any stronger stance, but they did disable comments on her particular post because a number of the comments were expressing racial sentiments. So you can post a GoFundMe based on grief that you've taken because of your overtly racist behavior. But if the people who give you money then say something racist, that is a bridge too far for Give, Send, Go. So at least we understand where they're at. So right now, as I sit here in front of the microphone, the Give, Send, Go page for Help Me Protect My Family is still up. And it says that nearly 30,000 people have donated to this. And right now it is at about $760,000. She updated her goal to $1 million. So God help us all. And that then brings us to the U.S. Surgeon General nominee that President Trump has just put forth, Dr. Casey Means. As I mentioned earlier, he needed to nominate somebody new because he had pulled the nomination for the previous person, due in part to Laura Loomer's rhetoric, but it was generally thought that this other doctor was not qualified for the position. So let's talk a little bit about Casey Means. The first thing that brought my attention to it more than any other news story was that when the president recently had some reporters in the Oval Office, and they asked him about Casey Means, and he said that he didn't really know who she was. And when pushed as to why then he nominated her, he said because RFK Jr. Thinks very highly of her. And that makes total sense, because when you're looking for a medical professional, you want to go to the guy who thinks that vaccines turn you into a Wi-Fi hotspot. But let's talk a little bit about Dr. Means. Dr. Means got her undergraduate and medical degrees from Stanford. She is a doctor. She did 5 years of surgical residency at the Oregon Health and Science University before strangely departing 6 months prior to completion. I haven't been able to find any information as to exactly why she decided to bail on that. But after that, then she co-founded something called Levels, which was a health technology company that focused on metabolic health through continuous glucose monitoring. She co-authored a 2024 book called Good Energy with her brother, emphasizing metabolic health and lifestyle changes. She's a prominent figure in the whole Make America Healthy Again movement, advocating preventive health care, nutritional reform, reduced reliance on pharmaceuticals. And she served as an advisor to RFK when he was still running for president, for the 2024 presidential campaign, and was a big contributor to health and policy discussions. Now, it should also be noted that her medical license has been inactive since January. We're not exactly sure why it's inactive, but it has raised some concerns about her current clinical qualifications. She departs rather fervently from traditional medicine in her views. She is a vaccine skeptic, and she has issues with hormonal birth control, labeling it disrespect for life, which is an interesting take. She has been criticized by other doctors and scientists, stating that her emphasis on metabolic dysfunction as a root cause for various diseases is a grand oversimplification of very complex health issues. And her nomination is already facing opposition from both liberal and conservative figures and former allies of RFK Jr., and they cite concerns over her qualifications to be Surgeon General, both for her ideological perspectives on things and her takes on medical issues. As I mentioned, RFK was heavily influencing the decision to have her nominated as Surgeon General, praising her as a visionary in healthcare reform. The president, as I mentioned, said he doesn't really know who she is, which begs the question: why are you nominating somebody who you're not familiar with? And maybe more to the point, why would you admit it? Why would you go in front of reporters and admit to nominating a person for Surgeon General of the United States and admit that you don't know anything about her. So one of the things that you'll notice here that is very conspicuously missing from, her story is any time working with or study in or experience with national health. Because when we're talking about the Surgeon General, we're talking about not only, policy statements on things that could end up being problematic if she's an anti-vaxxer and she does espouse a belief that we are too reliant on pharmaceuticals. But that there is a very gray sort of a statement. Big pharma is an issue, and the prices of medications is an issue, and the availability to people who really need them is an issue. I'm not sure how far down the road we go toward pharmaceuticals are bad before it becomes an issue where we are looking at medications that are tested and proven and beneficial to people that then become scrutinized by our would-be Surgeon General. But this public health vacancy in her resume is concerning, especially since we're here about 5 years away from a huge pandemic, and it makes one worried as to what information would be disseminated and what decisions would be made if, God forbid, we were ever to have something similar occur, whether it be bird flu or whatever is on the horizon. And it fits with the president's cabinet in general, because he seems to have a penchant for nominating folks who are questionable in their qualifications for the positions that they hold. I give you as examples our Secretary of Education, who has no background in education, and our Secretary of Health and Human Services, who has no background in anything other than conspiracy theories and web information as far as health and wellness and medicine are concerned. Spending as much time on social media as I do, I've seen nothing but full-throated support from the MAGA crowd as far as this nomination is concerned. But I mean, at this point, Trump could nominate a pet rock for Surgeon General, and most of the MAGA crowd would be like, well, it's a natural stone, so it's probably better than Fauci. But, I'd be interested to hear from anybody who's listening who might have right-leaning tendencies, what your thoughts are on the Surgeon General's, the new nominee for Surgeon General. So I'll take this opportunity to point you to my Linktree, which is linktr.ee/neighbor on the left, no spaces. That has links to my social media accounts for the podcast, where you can send me messages and let me know what your thoughts are on all of this. And I'd be happy to get input, especially from any conservatives that might be unlikely listening to my voice right now. And our last hot topic for the episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I see, and this is mostly on social media, but it certainly holds true in a lot of the conversations that I have with conservative friends. And it's the question, does Trump ever do anything wrong, according to his supporters? And, I could sit and I could give you 1,000 different examples of what I'm talking about, but, just a few. He gets caught in in outright lies. Like, for instance, the most recent of which is all the statistics that he keeps blurbing out when he's in front of reporters about how gas prices are the cheapest they've been in so long, and egg prices are down, and grocery prices are down, and every piece of information that you can find out there that isn't a social media post, it says that that is incorrect. But I never hear anybody on the right criticize him for saying these things that are demonstrably false. And as I said, there's so many other examples that you could give. I mean, when we talk about his felony convictions, I hear that, the system is crooked. And when I talk about his misogynistic comments that he's made through the years, I hear defenses for that. So I'm curious. I just want to hear, if I can, from anyone who might be listening, is there anything that he does wrong? Does he make mistakes? If so, can you give me some examples of what those mistakes might have been? And I'd be interested in people's thoughts too on why there is such fervent adherence to everything he says and does, despite things that are objectively bad. I saw a social media post recently, someone asking why we don't have, why the left doesn't have the same fervor for its candidates. I guess in this particular case, it was Biden, as the right has for Trump. And, one of the commenters had to explain, because in our mind, Biden and anybody else that we might vote for is an elected official. They're not a celebrity. They're not someone that we're supposed to idolize. We don't wear shirts and hats, at least not in nearly the numbers as the MAGA supporters do. Almost like it's something like, a sports team or something that you support. And I don't know exactly what to make of that, but I would be thrilled to have input from anybody who could offer it as to what the fervor is about Donald Trump the man, and why we hear so little from the right about missteps made by the president. All right, so that brings us to this episode's deep dive, one that I'm calling The MAGA Echo Chamber, How Right-Wing Media Shapes Reality. There is so much out there that you can hear in terms, or read in terms of the right-wing position on things, particularly the support of the administration and Donald Trump. And sometimes, to be quite honest, it feels like my conservative friends and conservatives in general that I read and hear things from are living in a completely different reality than the rest of us are. And I'm not trying to automatically insinuate that my reality is right and their reality is wrong, just that they are markedly different. And I'm trying to figure out exactly how that ends up being that way. So let me set the stage with a fictional sort of example here. You're at a family barbecue, and your cousin drops a line like, and this would have been, say last year. Your cousin drops a line like, Biden's not really in charge. It's Obama behind the scenes. Or maybe they say, yeah, Fox News is too liberal now. You have to go watch Newsmax to get the real story. And I know for me and so many people on the left, the easy thing to do is to just roll your eyes. But I believe there's something deeper going on here, and it doesn't really have anything to do with ignorance. It's about information segregation. I feel like most of the conservative folks that I know are sort of caught in a carefully curated media ecosystem. And what I mean by that is, if I'm on social media and I see something, and I do this with everything, especially now that I'm doing this podcast and I make so many posts on social media. When I read something, I immediately go and try to find it in several other places, because for me, that's the first litmus test as to whether or not what I've just heard holds any water. And I don't get the impression that my friends on the right do the same thing. I feel like they are, whether they're watching Fox or OAN or Newsmax or whatever their preferred source of information is, they trust it more implicitly than I tend to trust any source, and they take things they hear and take them as correct. Now, being the way I do things, I do watch more of the conservative sources than I would like, just because I'm trying to, like I said, parse things out and make sure that what I'm seeing is accurate. And what I noticed is there is a lot of repetition, whether you're talking about one of those sources I mentioned before, or Reddit forums, or YouTube rabbit holes, or whatever. If you're looking for information on a particular topic, you will hear a lot of things repeated constantly. And they all seem to center around one area: fear, anger, and outrage. Maybe that's 3 areas, but you know what I'm saying. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of weight put on the validity of the source as there is to the power of the message. I was watching a segment from a podcast that's done by a liberal podcaster named Dean Withers, and he was having a conversation on the podcast with somebody who had called in, and the person who had called in was criticizing the places that Withers said he would get most of his news information from, and he had cited NPR, Associated Press, and PBS News. And the caller said, "Oh yeah, you get all your news from the crap places." And Withers said, "Well, where do you get your news from that I should be using?" And the answer was TikTok. There was nothing about what the person said that made me think that they were being funny or sarcastic, that they were getting their information from TikTok, which is, insane on its face. But even the other sources that I mentioned, the conservative news sources, well, let's talk a little bit about how it works. And when you're out there now, folks have heard the word algorithm, I'm sure, before. Social media sites use an algorithm, and what they're meant to do is to reward engagement. So platforms like Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, when you are on one of these social media platforms and you are interacting with posts that you like, and let's assume for the sake of argument that you are liking a post because you agree with the content of the post, it uses that information to then supply you with more videos or more posts that are similar to the one that you liked, because it wants to reward your engagement. And, these days, nothing engages quite like outrage does. So if you watch one video titled "Biden is Ruining America," you're going to be served 10 more. And pretty soon, as you continue to like or comment or whatever, this becomes the dominant type of information on your feed. And it works both ways. It works both ways for sure. If you interact with posts that are critical of the administration, or that cast aspersions or make jokes about Donald Trump, then you're going to see more of them. But it's crucial to be aware of that. Another thing that I see in liberal media as compared to conservative media is conservative media does a lot more of telling you what you shouldn't listen to. For instance, I don't see a lot of stuff on liberal media that says don't watch Newsmax. They may point out a story on Newsmax that was false, but on the flip side of that, you get a lot of statements from the right like don't trust the mainstream media, which of course, Fox is part of the mainstream media, but let's not get logical. Don't trust experts. The deep state is lying to you. So the more you listen to this, the more you start to distrust multiple sources and tend to funnel down into one or two things that one or two places that you are willing to take your information from. A lot of the ecosystem then works on convincing audience members that they are under attack. And depending on the day or the hour, it will depend on what you're under attack by. You're under attack by immigrants. You're under attack by liberals in general. You're under attack by trans people or the LGBTQ population, globalists, media, Hollywood, whatever. And it's not just reporting stories that are negative about these things. It's literally saying that you're under attack. And they often use that particular phrase. And we can debate whether or not a place like Fox is quote unquote news. But, at that point, I remind you that in their lawsuit, where they were sued by Dominion over the false information that they peddled about the voting systems, they lost that case. They were forced to pay, it was, I don't know, something like $800 million in damages. And part of their defense in this particular case was to outright say that they are not news, they are entertainment and opinion. But they don't portray themselves like that outside of a legal proceeding. And, yes, you can find news on all of these sites. Of course you can find news on all of these sites, but they are always basting in a broth of opinion, and honestly, it all congeals together in a sort of identity reinforcement. They know what the people who are tuning in like to hear, so they say it, and they say it, and they say it. So then this echo chamber sort of a thing starts to play out in real life. You have millions of people who still believe that the 2020 election was rigged, and you can bury them in stories and facts about all of the cases that were brought to try and prove this that were thrown out because they just didn't have the evidence, and it doesn't seem to matter because that's not what you hear on many of these media outlets. You still have people. You had people during COVID who literally died because they trusted memes over medicine, and all the stuff, the ivermectin and the hydroxychloroquine or whatever it was, and the ridiculous campaign against wearing masks that the right espoused, and not just putting out there that they were ineffective, but that it was a conspiracy. It wasn't just that wearing a mask wasn't going to help. It was that you were being duped, you were being controlled, and really building up fear in people who, many of whom then stopped wearing masks, not simply because they were uncomfortable and they were convinced they didn't help, but because they didn't want to be controlled. And while I haven't heard any of this in my particular area, I do know that in small towns like mine, you'll see this kind of thing show up in school board meetings and city councils and church pulpits where, excuse me, we're not just disagreeing on policy, we're not even agreeing on what's real and what's not real. I mentioned earlier about, when I asked about do we ever disagree with Donald Trump, the people on the right, and he enforces a lot of these things too. He never stops talking about the 2020 election. Here we are. It's 5 years later, and he won the 2024 election, but he still hung up on the idea that he couldn't have possibly lost the 2020 election, which I think is the real issue for the president. It's not, I don't even know if it's that he truly believes that there's information out there that proves it. It's just that I believe in his mind, it's so inconceivable that he could have lost that means there has to have been something going on. There has to have been a conspiracy. There has to have been some sort of widespread voter fraud. So what do we do? What's the answer to all of this? And I think the first thing I want to say is that, the answer is not facts. We have to stop assuming that facts alone will change anything, because facts are up for grabs. You remember way back when President Trump was running for office the first time, and I can't remember if this was before or after he was elected, but we had Kellyanne Conway, who coined the term alternative facts, a phrase so utterly nonsensical on its face, but it took hold. And, the president likes to pepper things he says with phrases like, a lot of people are saying, and many people believe. And if you really think about it, they're meaningless terms. Especially in today's world. Many people think that the world is flat. And many people think that, we never went to the moon. And many people think a lot of things. But a popularity of an idea doesn't make the idea any more factual or any more based in reality. And particularly facts that come from places that a person doesn't trust aren't going to influence them in any way. So, and I think trust then becomes the issue. We have to find a way to build trust and build relationships. And, this is why if you look at social media posts of mine, I don't post things on social media that call conservatives stupid or that, attack voters of candidates that I don't support. Now, there are times when I'll see something on social media that's so just galactically stupid that I can't help but say so. But in terms of what I'm putting out there first, I like to point the finger at the politicians and the people around the politicians, the people who are putting themselves out there as right-wing pundits. But I think amongst ourselves, the folks who are not, well known, just the average Joes, we need to try and forge relationships. We need to ask questions instead of just spouting facts or arguing, and maybe try and plant seeds that will make folks think about the things that we talk about. It has to work better than throwing verbal punches, because that's not working at all. And I think for those of us on the liberal side, trying to support progressive media is very important, especially now. Just this past week, the president signed an executive order that's going to take away government funding from NPR and PBS. And I know that folks on the right don't like NPR, and I didn't realize that folks on the right had the same level of animosity towards PBS. I mean, in my mind, PBS is still Sesame Street that I grew up on, and there was a hearing not too long ago where Marjorie Taylor Greene decided to show a video of a drag queen that was supposedly performing on PBS, and if I'm not mistaken, it was found out that it did not air on PBS, but it had some sort of tangential connection to PBS in some way. But the more liberal voices that are out there, and the more reasonable those liberal voices can be, and the more attempts that liberal voices tend to deal in multiple sources for their information and show fact-checking information and verify things before they're said, these are all super important. And honestly, that's a big part of the reason why I started doing this podcast. I just hope that, anybody who listens to it shares that same frame of mind as to how we can sort of try and escape from the echo chamber, or at least help our friends who are in the echo chamber escape. And so try and remember the next time that you're talking with someone, and again, I'm talking to the folks on my side of the argument here. Next time you're talking to someone and you hear them spout something that sounds like it came right out of Tucker Carlson's fever dream, try and remember that it didn't come from nowhere. Okay? It came from the sources that the person you're listening to uses to get their information. And the only way to break through that is to speak up. Again, maybe in the form of questions, but speaking up. All right. That brings us to the end of another episode of Your Neighbor on the Left. Coming up in the next episode, aside from the hot takes that we find for the week, our deep dive for next week is going to focus on book banning, its threats to free thought, the racial implications, and a whole lot more. So I want to thank anyone who's downloaded this episode for doing so. Please take some time to comment or rate the podcast on whatever service that you're getting it from. It would be greatly appreciated. Again, as I mentioned, if you have questions or comments on any of the items in this episode, please go to one of the show's social media pages, and please don't hesitate to send messages. You can also send email. The email address is neighborotleftpodcast@gmail.com, all lowercase, no spaces. And shoot an email to the podcast, and I will do my best to answer it, and maybe even mention the question or the comment on a future episode. So I'll sign off here. Thanks again, and I hope you'll join us in a future episode. And until then, have the week you voted for.